What's going on, everybody? It's Brian Tripp. Welcome back to another episode of the REI Live podcast, where we interview the very best real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders all throughout the country. And today is obviously no different. We've got a great guest in store for y'all today, Mr. Tag Thompson out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. How's it going today, Tag?
It's excellent, Brian, man. Thanks for having me on.
Glad you're here. Just real quick, give just maybe a 30 to 60-second background of who you are, where you came from, and what you're up to today. Let's get some context into who you are and what you've done that gives you the authority to talk about what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so I'm a 20-year entrepreneur. I sold my first business when I was 19 years old. I've started, owned, operated 20-something businesses at this point. So I come from a long business background. I wouldn't consider myself a real estate expert, but what I have been able to do is to take what I've learned through that business experience and kind of put that into the understanding of how wholesaling works and create a really, what I would consider successful for me, wholesaling business that's based off of those principles.
Well, I'm super excited to dive in today. We're going to be talking a lot about business, how to set up a business, how to set up your wholesaling, what you may think is a business, how to actually set it up as a business. So I'm super excited to dive into that topic today with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast.
I want to talk to the bad business owner that's out there. And if you're listening to this right now, watching this, whatever it might be, you know you're bad. Let's be honest with ourselves. Let's look ourselves in the mirror. I'm not a good business owner. I'm bad when money comes in. I'm bad with how I spend it, how I allocate it, month to month, maybe 6 month to 6 month at best, probably not. I don't have things automated that should be automated, even just down to like marketing. I don't have the obvious things. It's month to month. My budget is a month to month based on how much I make the previous month. And I'm just not good at this. And I'm going to be honest with myself right now. Based on what I just said, Tag, what are some simple things that a wholesaler who thinks, maybe he or she thinks they're a business owner, but a wholesaler had maybe a lot of success, had some success. What are some simple things that I can do today that it's not going to get turned around overnight? But what are some simple things that I can do to put in place to where I can either delegate, I can have maybe more consistency in my business?
First one, business finance. You need to understand how money comes in and comes out. Second, you need to understand leadership. You can't grow a company without people, and you can't keep people without understanding how to lead them. So understanding how to lead. And then 3, you need to have a documented process. So I've yet to find a successful business owner that doesn't have a documented process. And I don't mean up here. Everybody knows when marketing, everybody knows when postcards go out in their head. Everybody knows when phone calls are supposed to be made. We all know that stuff in our head. But the successful ones are the ones that put it down on paper so that other people can run that for them. So those are the really 3 things that I found in everyone.
And I want to dig into all 3 of these things. I want to ask you specific questions about them. But before I do, who should be putting this in place? Is it let's say I'm listening to this right now and I'm brand new. Maybe I've done a few deals. Should I be putting this in place now? Or do I need to get to a certain point? Is there a certain point that you can get to and it's too late for me? Let's figure that out first.
So I remember when I first started playing baseball. I was 12 years old. I was raised in Central America, didn't really interact with baseball very much. It was all soccer. So I came to the US and my dad threw me in a little league team, right? And I had this old plastic glove. And I had no idea what I was doing. No clue. I'd never swung a baseball bat. I'd never done it before. I struck out every time I bat that year. Every ball that was hit to me went between my legs. I was terrible because I had no experience, no practice. I didn't have the mental concept of how baseball worked. So should everyone that is a wholesaler, or maybe you haven't even done a deal yet, but you think that your life, like your divine calling is in that direction, should you focus on these things? Yes, 100%. I believe that with all my heart, because at some point you're going to want to make the decision, hey, this is working really well and I want to grow it. And at that point, if you've already started learning these things and developing those hard and soft skills there, you'll be able to make an educated decision about whether that's a good idea for you. And because I say that because maybe while you're learning about leadership, you'll realize that you have no interest in actually developing people. Maybe that's not what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'll start looking at some of the finance modeling and budgeting and all that. And I'm not saying you can't delegate that part of it once you're there, but if you can't read a P&L, then it doesn't matter if you have someone doing the numbers for you. You don't know the health of your business. And if you don't have a documented process, you don't have a plan to work toward. So
Got it.
I do. My opinion is 100%. Like, you need to be learning all this stuff right now. And I tell this to people that I talk to. I tell them all the time, if you're wanting to scale, don't you dare join another real estate mastermind. Don't do it. If you want to scale, you're not going to scale your business by, and I hate to say this in front of you, but you're not going to learn how to scale a business in a RIA. You need to get outside of the real estate world for people that are talking in general business concepts, and you need to absorb all that, because it's all important. A business is a business. And if you understand those things, you'll be able to scale.
Well, let's talk about these. You're not offending me. You're not offending me.
I know
the RIA comments.
I wouldn't have said it.
No, I think meetup groups are important just for
Yeah.
networking, being known, knowing other people, a lot of other reasons. But learning business is important, and I feel like that's one of the main reasons people the main reason people fail, in my opinion, what I've seen, is lack of consistency.
Yeah,
and lack of consistency comes from not having these three things in place that you just mentioned. So I want to talk about them individually. You said number one, understanding finance, money in, money out. This is the big, and you can just kind of comment on it if you'd like to, but this is the big question I have, is when I'm beginning and maybe I did my first deal and a big wave of money came in. Say I made $10,000 on my first deal. How do I allocate that first $10,000? What do I do with it? And to set myself up for consistency down the road.
Yeah. So I always tell people in that scenario, there are some personal decisions that need to be made in that. I do think that you need to have, within that $10,000, if you need to reward yourself with something, that's important. If you need to buy a toy, a little toy, or if you need to go on a little trip, or if you need to feel the success, that's so important in mental consistency around getting the next deal. So, but the majority of that first deal needs to go into making the next one. I tell people, if you can do it, 75% of that deal needs to go into getting the next two, not even the next one, the next two. Because once you get two, well, now you can actually take 40% of those two in order to get the next two. So as you grow, you don't have to invest as big of a percentage of the deal. But I agree with you. The thing that stopped, I know so many people that have done one deal. I mean, almost everybody I know has done one deal before, but they forgot that very important principle you just said of understanding that there's got to be a good investment in the next one. So
a good investment.
A good investment. Yeah.
Because a lot of people, I'm guilty of this. I spent money in any way imaginable. I was on the radio doing TV ads, billboards. We did 1,000 bandit signs every single Friday night, direct mail. I mean, on and on and on. We're spending 20 grand a month. Hey, we got it. Let's spend it. And let's do more and more and more and bigger and bigger and bigger with no real plan.
Yeah. And so it's funny, I talked to a guy out of Birmingham last year, and he called me. He's like, "Hey man, I finally got my first deal closed. Where should I spend my marketing dollars?" And I was like, "Well, where did you get the first one?" And he was like, "Well, I got a bunch of reused bandit signs and I put those out." I was like, "Well, do you have any more of them?" He was like, "Oh yeah, I got a ton." I'm like, "Well, just keep doing that. do that. Like, you don't need to expand yet. Like, you've just done one deal and it seems like you've got a decent strategy. And that's been a year since then, and he still is just doing bandit signs. He's doing great. So you get a little cash in your pocket, and you do get that shiny object syndrome of like, now I need to do something a little more complex. And maybe there'll be a time for that, but man, there's no safer investment than doing what you know. And if you just got to get to that next deal, do what you know.
So how do we allocate the 10,000? I made 10,000. I did my first deal, Tag.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a statistic. I did my first
Okay.
deal. How do I get to my second deal? How do I invest? How do I allocate this money?
Yeah. Brian, how much did it cost for you to get that first deal?
Nothing. I bootstrapped it. I was driving for dollars, $50 a month on the Driving for Dollars app.
Awesome, man. So what I would do is I would keep doing that. Right.
Okay.
So you're going to keep Driving for Dollars. You're going to kind of double down on that as much as you can.
Okay.
But I would want you to put at least half of that $10,000 in an account that you can't touch. Unless you
What does
absolutely
that
have
look
to.
like? Because obviously I could touch any account. Because maybe
give it to a friend and say, don't give it to me unless I beg for it. You know, whatever the thing is, you've got to settle as big of a portion as you can. You've got to set that aside. Because
why?
because you're going to need it to invest in the future of your company. Like, you're going to need that if you're going to invest in it. Because if you don't happen to get another deal from Driving for Dollars, from bootstrapping, okay, well, maybe let's do some mailers. Maybe you're going to start a campaign, and you were Driving for Dollars and you're sending those people postcards. Well, maybe we're gonna double down and send them a letter. Like, you can and will reinvest that money. But it is so important to hold as much of that back as you can, because it will, as long as there's money there, you're going to feel successful. You will, as long as you have in that memory that there's, okay, that Ted's still holding $5,000 for me from that deal I made. Like, it's still a success in your head.
But
Whereas
Tag,
if you
I need a CRM. I need to get a new computer. I need to get an office. I need to get an office space. Tag. I need to hire a VA. I need to do all these things. So I'm going to spend all that money.
Yeah, and that's what I say. Like, well, what are you going to do with all those things? Like, have you led people before? Like, do you know what to do with that VA? Do you know what you would do in that office? You know, what's your plan? Again, what's your documented plan? Because, Brian, what you're talking about is a business. Like, all those things, an office and employees and software and all those things, that's a business. And you're not necessarily running a business yet. Like, you're wholesaling, you know? Do you still have a full-time job? Do you still, you know, is this genuinely what you're going to alter the trajectory of your life to do? And there may come a point in time when you do that, but it's usually not after your first deal. So usually I say, get your first deal and use the proceeds of the first deal to get your next two.
But Tag, there was I'm in all these Facebook groups, and there's there's some mentors, there's some gurus that said, once I get my first deal, I can pay them $5,000, maybe even $10,000, and they're gonna train me and teach me this. I could spend my money that way, can't I? Don't you think that'd be a good investment for me?
The word coach is written across your chest, Brian. So, yeah, that question I would honestly answer a little more personally, like what they need and
I'm not
what they want.
I'm not a coach.
Yeah.
Pretend I'm not a coach. I'm being honest. I'm being serious.
Yeah. Yeah. So is your plan to, like, are you wanting to be a full-time, like, wholesaling is my life from now on? Is that what you want to do?
I want to quit my 9 to, I'm still hanging on to my job just for that little security blanket. My wife is not, not fully on board yet. I just did one deal. I want to get her on board. Should I invest in a coach with this money I made?
Yeah. I wouldn't. Again, I don't know that you need one yet. You already got a deal. You already have proved the concept that you can drive for dollars and you can get a deal. So maybe get two more. You did it once. It wasn't an accident. You worked hard. You followed a process wherever you learned how to do it. So I'd maybe get one or two more under your belt, and then really take your time. If you want to find a mentor, mentors are incredibly important. I've spent a ridiculous amount of money on mentorship and coaching, and I've never regretted it. So that's very good. But before you spend half the proceeds of your hard-earned money on coaching, let's make sure this is something you really want to do.
True.
So you've already proven that you can get deals and move them. So let's get two more before you jump into that, and then we'll talk again.
Tag, before we move on to thank you for indulging me, by the way. Before we move on to points 2 and 3, what else do I need to know? What else does a kind of, and maybe not even necessarily someone who's brand new, someone who is just either brand new, newer, maybe someone's just bad at business and admits, hey, I'm bad at business. Anything else that we need to know about money in, money out, understanding the financial aspect of running a business?
Yeah, really simply, like if you, and you can YouTube University this thing if you want to, you need to understand how to read a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. I mean, that's kind of like the minimum, but that's also almost enough to understand how your business works. I mean, that's not very complex. Again, you can probably learn that from YouTube, but how do you read a profit and loss statement? How do you read a balance sheet? But if you can't do that, I would not proceed to start hiring people and building out a business.
Let's say I get the basics of that. I kind of have a basic understanding of how that works. The real questions are, I feel like I need an office. I feel like I was mentioning earlier, I feel like now I need a VA to start maybe doing some cold calling for me. So I'm not cold calling all the time. Are these, and this might lead into the leadership and the documented process. Hopefully it does. But are these things I should be thinking about? Or should I just try to, if I bootstrap my way through the first deal, I need to bootstrap my way through the second, third, fourth, and fifth deal, and then build up a war chest, so to speak, build up some money, and now I can actually go and invest that wisely.
It's interesting. Everything that you mentioned, I call those have-tos. Getting an office, hiring people. You should never do those until you have to, right? So getting an office will not bring you in more money. Like it won't. Like that's a tool that you need to have at some point. Hiring people will not bring you in more money. That's a tool you have to have at some point when you've maximized what you can put into it. So yeah, you don't have to do those right now. If you don't need an office, I wouldn't get an office. I mean, some people actually might need an office pretty early on. Maybe you're, maybe you're working from home and you got a boatload of small kids around, and work from home just doesn't work for you, and you can't do a garage or something like that. Mm-hmm. So there are some situations, but they're pretty rare.
Right.
So yeah, I would say, hey, like wait until you have to. Do you have to? And I would also say, who told you needed an office? That's usually my first question. Yeah. And then I'd say, well, tell me about that person, and let's figure out like why you think they told you needed an office. Yeah. Because an office, for some reason, is a pride point. It feels like you're doing something, like it feels something. So I don't have an office. I'm here in a co-working space in Chattanooga, and we're fine. No problem at all.
So let's move on to that. You mentioned there's kind of three aspects of, hey, I'm bad at business, or I want to start a wholesaling. I want to turn my hobby into a business. I want to turn my side hustle into a true business. And you mentioned that there are kind of three things off the top of your head that you felt like were important into doing that. Number one is understanding finance. We kind of touched on that. And the second thing you said was leadership, understanding people and understanding how to lead people. Why is that important? And when should I start leading people?
So it is the absolute most foundational thing you can do for yourself before you scale a business. And I say before. There's no other resource we have that we can exponentially get a higher return on than people. So as you hire somebody, if you understand how to lead them, how to treat them, they will provide a higher return on investment. And there are many ways in which you can do that don't cost you anything. So let's compare a person to a marketing channel, right? So if you're doing postcard mailers and it costs you $600 in postcard mailers to get $10,000 in revenue.
Right.
Okay, so you're investing that $600 to get that $10,000 back. No matter what you do to that $600, you're going to have to either spend more money, you're going to have to spend resources changing something, or design dollars. Like, there's really no way you can, once you have that effectively maximized, you can't get a better return on it unless you're putting more resources in. So eventually you're gonna have to send more mailers, you have to spend more money. People are different. If you have somebody, a team member, and you truly invest in them and you understand their personal needs and their business needs and the long-term goals, and you create an environment that they are committed to your success and the company's success, they will work harder for you. You don't have to give them more money to make them work harder. You literally can give them a pat on the back or an encouraging phone call. I can't call my money and encourage it on the phone and it perform any better for me. I can't call the print house and say, hey, put me on the phone with my postcards and tell my postcards how proud I am of them. They're not going to work any harder for me.
Right.
Like, their effort is fixed.
Right.
But if I go over there and I put my hand on one of my acquisition managers' back and tell them, man, I really appreciate how hard you worked. I saw you on the phone with that seller, and I was really impressed at how you stuck to it and you pushed a little bit harder. Like, if I do that, do you think that team member is going to work a lot harder? Hell yeah. Like, oh my God, they are. Yeah. So people are the only resource I can find that scenario is true about. I don't have to put any money into that. It literally is just my kindness and my words and my appreciation, and they'll work harder for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, leadership is the biggest thing you can do to absolutely skyrocket your success. No doubt about it. I will argue that point with anybody. And that's why I tell people, if you're looking to scale, looking to grow, listen to Leadership Podcast. Andy Stanley's got a great one. I know he's a pastor, but he also has a leadership podcast that's really good. Dave Ramsey, even though I'm not a big fan of his financing and financial advice, has a great leadership podcast. So there's a bunch of different tools you can use to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, leadership's it's vital.
Leadership, you mentioned understanding finance, leadership, and then the third part is to document the process. To actually have a documented process. It's hard to imagine going and hiring anyone unless you know what it is that you're hiring them for, and that they can follow a written out, easy to follow process. So is that why that's important? What are some other reasons why having a documented process is important?
So I have a thought that I always try to have in the back of my head, which is, what happens if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and I have to leave work for 6 months? Right. So what happens if literally I cannot make a phone call? I can't talk to anybody. I can't fix anything. Could my business operate without me? Could they at least figure it out? Would they know what to do next? So, and this is it is a tedious, and it is not a fun part of your business. But if you do this, it enables you to do a few things, right? So my business is documented from pre-marketing all the way down to what happens after the check clears, right? So we have everything documented. I don't know how many pages this document is at this point, but it's pretty big. So every little thing that needs to happen along the way, do we need to get a mortgage payoff from the seller? That is in part of our process. Okay, whose responsibility is it to do that? And what is the timing in which that's supposed to happen? So we get a contract signed with the seller. At what point do we need to have the mortgage payoff signed after that point? So for us, I think it's 4 days. So within 4 days of getting the contract signed, we should have a mortgage payoff if they need one. So our entire process is bullet pointed, and there's accountability and time frame built into everything. So having that allows me to do a few things. First of all, it allows me to not have to worry about what's happening and who's going to do it. because everything's set in stone already. Every person knows where they fit within in that document. But it allows me to focus on making decisions about when to change the strategy, because your team will hold themselves accountable. They'll hold themselves accountable to you, but really to that document, to that documented process. So if they have a question about what to do, they don't have to ask me. It should be in the document. So when I change something, if I want to change something about our strategy, I have to look at that document, and it allows me to see how that one decision will impact the entire process. So I can make much smarter decisions, and I'm not tempted just to make changes, on a whim, because I can see how it affects the whole process.
Tag, let's simplify that, if you don't mind, because that seems daunting. Everything that you're kind of talking about right now. Someone who's kind of getting started with this whole everything that you're just kind of presenting today. I recognize the importance of this. I want to kind of put some of these things in place. What are some simple things that maybe I can do to start documenting the process versus having like just imagining writing out a big thick manual just overwhelms me? What are some simple things? How can I get started?
Yeah, you can boil this down into a one-page document. So there's 3 parts to any wholesaling business. You've got leads, acquisitions, and dispositions. Everything kind of falls into those 3 buckets. So if you want to start really simply, start on one piece of paper, leads at the very top, acquisitions in the middle, dispositions at the bottom. And then just brainstorm for a little bit and think of everything you can think of that needs to happen for those 3 things to function like a machine, right? So we don't want to get stuck in that cycle of, I got a bunch of leads and now I got a deal and I'm working to close it, and it closes and now I don't have any leads, right? So you need to have a time frame within each of those. So your leads, right? So what's your main market? Let's say we're doing postcards, right? So in your document, it needs to say postcards. Postcards are mailed on the 5th of every month, which is our time frame. So when does something need to happen? And then our accountability. Who's going to make sure that happens? So if you're by yourself, it's going to be you on most of them, right? So, but even if it is you, I think it's important to document that it's supposed to be you. Because at some point you're going to be busy and you're going to need to look at that document and say, okay, like I'm too busy to make sure that my postcards go out on time. So I'm going to offload making sure that those postcards go out to an assistant or somebody, and then you'll change that to, now my assistant does that. So you can really break those down into a one-page document, really simple: lead gen, acquisitions, and dispo, and make sure that every repetitive task that should be happening has a time frame. When does it happen, and who's supposed to make it happen? And that's really all you've got to do.
I think that just kind of breaking it down like this is, I don't see a lot of this out there. And, and I know your background that we talked earlier, your background is just, kind of entrepreneurship in general. And it's just, you kind of, whether it's you've learned it, it's just kind of inside of you. It's important to have folks who've kind of done that, been there, done that, to kind of talk about the simple ways to build a true business. Cause I don't think, and I'll speak for myself here, but I didn't get into wholesaling because I wanted to work long hours and build this, gigantic monster that for me, it got kind of out of control. I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. And it ended up taking up, 80, 90, even 100 hours a week of my time, because I'm trying to control this monster, and I'm a control freak anyway. So that didn't work out well for me. And I don't know how many people are actually teaching, hey, you know what? From the get-go, let's start to build an actual business versus something that's just going to have you running around, where you think it's cool in the beginning because you quit your 9 to 5 and now you're your own boss, and that's kind of cool. And that's a good, freeing feeling. But what ends up happening after a very short period of time is the very reason you got into wholesaling, the very reason you got into real estate, again, speaking for myself, ends up, I'm kind of right back to where I was. I'm almost a slave to my business versus a slave to another boss. At least then I was only working 40 hours a week. And same feelings though. So really just trying to hopefully pass on some good information to folks who are, you know what, I got into real estate because I wanted freedom, not because I wanted to create a big, gigantic enormous job for myself to where I'm working even more hours. Let's actually like figure out ways to accomplish our goal from the goal that we had from the beginning.
Yeah. No,
Any last words before we let people go?
Yeah, no, it's been great. Yeah.
Well, Tag, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you sharing all this wisdom with us. Again, I just don't think it's something that gets talked about enough. So I appreciate you, and guys, tune in next time for another great episode of the REI Live podcast. We'll see y'all next time.